This week's podcast is sponsored by Whitney Antiques, an antique shop in the heart of Oxfordshire, specialising in historic needlework. If you'd like to know more about Whitney Antiques, check out their website at www.whitneyantiques.com. Hello and welcome back to Unearth the Past, a family history and genealogy podcast brought to you by me, Dr. Michaela Hume. So today we are doing something a little bit different. I've actually got my mate joining me today, the lovely Ian. I've known your wife actually, Shari, for, I don't know, maybe 20 odd years or something. Yeah, a long time. And many moons ago, which we're going to go through in a minute, Shari came to me and said, can you help Ian trace his birth parents? So today we're going to talk a bit about that process, a bit about how we did it, and hopefully, because we've had such an amazing reaction to the Matty White episode of the podcast, and if you haven't seen it, by the way, I'll put the link in the description below. But hopefully what we talk about today will help anybody out there who is also looking to trace their birth parent. If you are on this journey, please get in touch with me and let me know how you're getting on. You can do so via my website, which is www.michaelahume.com. So let's get started. Ian, thank you so much for joining me on these rather lovely chairs.
You're welcome.
To talk about family history and genealogy. So can we go right back to the beginning then?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you find out you were adopted?
About when I was 11 or 12. As the usual thing that kids do, they were rooting around the house. And there was a cupboard at the top of the stairs. And I was looking through that, and in the corner was a alligator skin box, and I thought that looked interesting. So
Yeah.
I thought,
Yeah,
I'm having a look what's
in
in there.
Yep.
And it was just full of papers of various things. In amongst it were these papers to do with adoption. And I found two sets for a boy and a girl. And I was looking at them and obviously didn't recognise either of the names on them. And it suddenly twigged what they were and who they related to. And that's it. That's how I found out that I was adopted.
And did you have any idea then, before that point? Was there any sort of inkling? Did you feel you were different or?
Yeah, I've got to admit, I felt
Right.
that I was different from my parents. I don't know how and I don't know why, because it was a long time ago now. But I just had that sense that I was different from both of them and different from my sister.
Right.
So it sort of made sense.
Yeah. And when you found out, what did you do then? Did you go and tell them that you knew your parents, or did you keep it to yourself?
A rough guess, that was sort of 45 years ago. My parents have never actually come out and told me officially that I was adopted.
Right.
Never. So they know that I know,
Right,
and they've
okay.
talked about it, but they never actually came out. And when I found out, I didn't really know what to do with it. I was 12.
I was going to say, how did you process that?
I don't think I did.
Right,
It sort of made sense, but it wasn't something I was then at that time capable of working out and moving forward with. So although it shed a lot of light on things, and weirdly enough, I was in a class at school with 2 or 3 other people that were adopted.
Right.
And it came up as a subject in an English lesson. And once we'd all sort of admitted that we were adopted, it sort of gave you a sense of belonging with these people.
Yeah.
But no, other than that, I didn't deal with it, I don't think. I think I just probably shelved it.
Did it, growing up, did it change the relationship you had with your mum and dad?
I think I probably just got on with it.
Yeah.
And it was weird. Probably the reason why I thought I was different was because of the relationship that I had with my parents. So that that led me to think that I might be different, and then this just rubber stamped it.
Yeah.
So it was just a case of business as usual. There was no change because I was always different from them, and I felt that relationship was I don't know, odd.
Yeah.
So it carried on being odd.
So let's fast forward in time.
Yep.
2016-ish.
Yeah.
Me and Shari worked out when we had our chat last night.
Yeah.
Was when you decided, or I think Shari reached out.
Yeah.
And decided we were going to look into your family tree.
Yeah.
And try and locate who your birth parents were. I don't think it was a case at the time of, you had any ambition to sort of meet them, was it? I think it was just a case of, it was, you just wanted to know.
It was finding out. I mean, I suppose throughout my adult life, it kept rearing its head every so often. And it was always a bit of I always had a smile whenever if I went to the doctors or something like that. And they said, there's always the question, have you got a family history of X, Y, or Z?
Yeah.
And I just sort of smiled because I was like, I haven't got a clue, whether there was a family history of X, Y, or Z. So to an extent, I suppose I wanted to find out a little bit more about that, and where I came from, who they were, because when you're very different, or for me anyway, when I realised how different I was from my parents, it sort of made me want to find out who my birth parents were and to explain the difference. That's probably it, yeah.
Was it more like personality-wise that you felt different from your parents, or was it a looks thing? Because I know when I've spoke to some people who've contacted me to sort of look into, find unknown parentage, a lot of them have said to me, I just felt like I didn't know who I looked like. I didn't look like anybody else.
That again, very odd, because my dad had a shop and people used to come into it, and I used to spend time in there growing up. And on more than one occasion, people said that I actually looked like my dad. Obviously, they didn't know. I don't think I did. And certainly in retrospect, looking at older pictures of him, there's no way that I did. Yeah. So there was never some huge, physical difference between them. So it was all about personality. It was all working out why I'd grown up in their care, but was so different from them.
Yeah.
As a person. So yeah, it was more about personality.
Now, when we talk about your adoptive parenting and being adopted, and even in the conversations we've had over however many years, you are very pragmatic about it. Yeah, you're very pragmatic about it. Do you think that's because you found out when you were young, when you were just sort of 12 years old? Do you think that would have been different had you have found out, I don't know, maybe when you were in your 20s or your 30s?
I think the reason I was pragmatic about it was because I was aware that I was different. I used to sort all my own problems out in my head as much as you can when you're a child, because obviously you're limited. But I definitely used to process everything and sort things out in isolation. So when I found out that I was adopted, that just put the bow on the top of it as far as I was concerned. So the self-reliant pragmatism just kicked into overdrive, really. And I spent my entire teenage and adult years very much in my own head, sorting my own problems out and doing my own thing. Because at that point, emotionally, I probably wasn't, developed into a full adult at that point in time. So it was the only way that I could deal with it and work it out.
So let's get to 2016 then. Shari reached out to me and said, we're thinking about doing this. Can you offer some advice?
Yeah.
Now, the problem we had in terms of documentary evidence, which is what you had. We had your adoption papers, didn't we?
Yes.
And it did have a name, your biological mum and your biological dad, and we did have an address.
Yes.
But the surnames were, let's just say, popular surnames.
They weren't unusual.
No.
Yeah.
And the reason that we're actually not going to mention them on this podcast, which we'll speak about later on, is because we know that on your biological father's side, there is potentially a half sibling out there who may not know about this. So that's why we're not going to mention the names on this podcast. So we had these names and we had an address in Manchester, in Withington Way, I think it was, wasn't it, at the time? Mm-hmm. They were very popular. So I went on and did a quite broad search to see if I could identify the families. But due to the popularity of the surnames, there's quite a few families that we could have placed you in. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. So I then recommended to go to the library and have a look at the electoral registers. Yeah. Which you did.
I did, yes.
So talk to me about that.
Obviously a completely new experience to me, but I went down to Central Library because I had the two addresses, so there was a starting point, and I knew when I was born, so there was another bit of it. So I sort of, probably the accountant in me, I started out at my birth year and then went forwards and backwards year by year, and my father's side was initially a little more forthcoming in the fact that there were people at that address with that surname. Yeah. So it was sort of a bit of a bingo. However, moving backwards and forwards in time, there was never any mention of his name at this address. So that sort of became a little bit of a dead end.
And just to interject slightly as well, if you are searching the electoral register, in the period that we were looking, 1960s, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. You can only search by address, and they're all on microfilm. Yeah. So you've got to figure that out to start with, which is,
that was well. I mean, I was lucky because I had the addresses, so that was a good start for me. And initially, the hardest one was on my mother's side. At the address that was given, there was nobody of that surname ever, going forwards or backwards. So I walked away from Central Library thinking, great. It's a complete dead end. So I didn't have a clue where to go from there.
No, so I think that's where I came in.
It certainly is.
So I came in then. So we decided, so when we looked at your dad's side on the electoral register, there were people with that surname, as you rightly said, living at that address. The problem is, on the electoral register, you don't get the first name, so you don't get the Christian name. No. It's just an initial. Mm-hmm. And because of how popular the surname was, I really couldn't grab anything on that side of the tree and run with it, apart from this address in the 60s. And we even looked at phone books, do you remember? Yeah. We went on the phone book, the BT phone book archive here in the UK, and we just hit a dead end. So we decided then we were going to focus all our energy on your mum's side. Yep. Now, your mum's side, we just relied on paper records. We didn't use DNA, and it's worth pointing that out because in 2016, when we were looking, I hadn't really used DNA in any of my research at that point. So we just relied on the paper records, and that's kind of what I think I grabbed onto those names, and I knew where they'd lived. I knew that they lived in Withington, an area of Manchester. Mm-hmm. And if I'm right by saying, and I might be wrong here, but because it was a while ago, that the names at the address that we had didn't correspond with the surname of your biological mother, but were in fact relatives.
Yes.
Yes. So when I started plotting this very sort of broad family tree based on the names that were living at the address, I did manage to find that they were a relation of your birth mother. Not an immediate relation, but they were a relation. Yeah. I then managed to use electoral registers in the present to identify what would be a potential aunt. Yeah, great aunt for you and great uncle.
Mm-hmm.
And then I managed to track them down to an address in Stockport, and then we reached out to that.
Yeah.
When I came to you and I sort of said, because I'm laughing because I can remember Shari's reaction when I said, I think I've found somebody who's a close relative on Ian's mum's side.
Yeah.
And I know that I have gone through that rather quickly. Can I just say this did take months, by the way. This building of the family tree did not happen overnight. When I came and I said, I think I found a relative on your side, on your biological mum.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
Odd. It's just a complete surprise because all of a sudden your place in the world and your reference points become different because you grow up with people who've decided to take you and care for you and look after you, and that's your family, and then all of a sudden, knowing that they're not blood, then all of a sudden you're thrown into this place where there are names, and I knew the names for a long time, but then when you came and you'd found these people, it was like, holy, this is, there's family here, there's people here, and it just throws you, it throws you completely. It's the only way I can describe it. It's like you're suddenly in a whole new world.
When Shari reached out to your great aunt and uncle, was there a fear there of maybe being rejected or worried that they're going to go, oh, it's all right? Because I imagine that must be a genuine fear, Ian, for people who have been adopted. Maybe that's the reason why some people don't want to reach out.
Yeah.
Because they're worried about that.
Yeah, I can't speak for everybody that's been adopted, but yeah, for me, yes, definitely. There was, as soon as you become sort of adult, and you can then process what's actually gone on in more detail, you realise that there's this process of rejection for whatever reason. It could be completely valid reasons, but for whatever reason you were given away, and that's difficult to compute as to why. So when you're then faced with people that are connected to you, there's always that, oh my God, is it gonna be another case of rejection? Is it going to be the same thing? So there's always that fear with that. Yeah, always.
So Shari reached out.
Yeah.
And they, rightly so, I think, were quite maybe apprehensive, a bit guarded at first, weren't they?
Yeah.
But then they contacted another family member who actually remembered your biological mum being pregnant, remembered you being born, and your mum giving you up for adoption.
Yes.
So that was when the story of how you came into the world was confirmed.
Yeah. The great aunt and great uncle I met, and they filled in some of the blanks and told me more about what was going on. But obviously, because they were a great aunt and great uncle, and I believe at the time they were not in the country when I was born, they gave me some details.
So we had identified your great aunt and uncle, and they had confirmed the story. And then you reached out then, once we identified who your biological mother was, you reached out to your biological mother through letter.
Yes.
And that's how you made we made first contact, wasn't it, with your biological mother through a letter.
Yeah, literally wrote a letter to her.
And how what do you put in that letter?
Well, again, probably the accountant in me, I kept it reasonably, factual, and
Right.
I explained who I was. I explained briefly how I'd come to find
Okay.
out about her and find her details,
Yeah.
and literally no more than that, because I thought this is presumably going to come as a complete and utter shock to her that I'm in contact.
Yeah.
Although I do believe the aunt who'd confirmed what had happened had actually been in contact with her and explained that she'd been in contact. I don't think she was expecting to hear from
Yeah.
me via in any form. So so I just kept it brief.
Wow. And you got a response.
I did get a written response, yes.
And I've read the letter.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say that the response was answered maybe a few questions,
Yeah,
but she was very clear in the letter
yeah,
that that was the only letter you were going to receive.
yeah.
And how was that?
I don't know. I do know. It's fairly devastating.
I was going to say,
Although I didn't actually want anything.
yeah.
It's sort of rejection to the return, isn't it? It's the same thing over again. So yeah, it was pretty devastating to go through that. However, because I wasn't expecting anything from it, I wasn't looking for a new family or anything like that. But I did expect something. But no, there wasn't anything.
I read that letter last night because Sharon
Yeah.
sent it to me. And I had mixed emotions. At the beginning, it was very sort of cold and very matter of fact, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And then it kind of warms up a bit in the middle, asking,
Yeah.
I hope you're all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I read that and I was choked up last night, and I don't know, it's because I'm your mate. But what we do know about your birth mother was that you have a half sister.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you received the response,
Yeah.
how did you react to that, or did you not, to your birth mother? Did you just kind of leave that there?
Yeah. Basically, it was her request
Yeah.
that I just let it lie.
Okay.
So I did.
Yeah. Okay.
Out of respect.
Yeah.
So I just let it go.
And then there is a happy ending to this story, isn't there?
Yeah.
A very nice happy ending. So somewhere in the country, you have a half sister,
Yeah.
and this is a couple of years later. Your half sister, your biological mum at this point is in a home because she's unwell.
Yeah.
And your half sister is going through the house and is trying to log on to a computer.
Yep.
And the computer prompt for the password is put in the name of your oldest child.
Yep.
And she's putting her name in, and it keeps firing an error message back.
Yep.
Do you want to carry on the story?
Shortly, obviously, after that had happened, I got a phone call from my great aunt's daughter saying that she'd been in touch with her, asking why this was the case. And she explained to my half-sister what had gone on, and then gave her my contact details. At which point, I then got a phone call from my half-sister for the first time in 51 years. So it was very, very bizarre. It was really odd. We were on the phone for hours. And again, I wasn't expecting anything. I wasn't looking for extended family, but we just started talking and talking and talking. And I think as the conversation wore on, we suddenly started to realise that our personalities, even though we didn't know each other, were very, very similar. And from then, we spoke some more, and then we ended up phoning each other sort of every week. And then a couple of months after that, they came up to see us, and we met her and her husband. And since then, I WhatsApp her probably 4 or 5 times a week. We speak, at least 2 or 3 times a week, and we go up and down to see each other. It's weird. It's a sister, it's a half sister, but and I say I'm not looking for one, but because we're so similar and we get on, it's just grown into what it is now, which is it's wonderful. It's quite wonderful, and I can't. She said to me that she wished I was around years ago, which is sort of slightly heartbreaking. But it's just nice that she's there now and part of my life, and I'm part of hers.
With your half sister, I know you said that personality-wise you are very similar.
Yeah.
But you'd never felt that way, did you, with your birth parents? Like you said, it wasn't about that you looked different to them. It was that you were different.
Yeah, different
inside.
as a person. Yeah. So to suddenly, I mean, the chances are you can bump into anybody and be, similar to them. She had to, for her work, she had to do a psychometric test, and the result of which came out with this: you're this particular type of person, and only 2% of the population are this type of person. She sent me the test, and I came out with exactly the same result as she did. So we're very similar. The sort of the nature bit of nature and nurture. There's obviously a strong correlation there, and we do have. We just get on because we're very similar to each other, I think, and that's quite remarkable to think that we've not known each other all our lives effectively up until this point, and it's definitely it's brilliant. It's a wonderful thing, and I'm so pleased that we did it, and that bit just happened through the password going missing, so that that. I don't know how to describe it other than that. It's just amazing to find that out, and it helps complete the picture a little bit as well as to where I come from, because obviously she's got a lot more detail about my birth mother that other people didn't have.
So we've spoke about your mum's side, your biological mother's side. Now let's go on to your biological father's side.
Yeah.
So we started researching your biological mum's side in about 2016.
Yeah.
I knew straight away by looking at your biological father's side, this was going to be difficult just due to the popularity of the surname.
Yeah.
And also that his Christian name is a very common name as well. So we knew that was going to be different. Obviously, we don't want to knock on the wrong door. Yeah. Or reach out to the wrong person.
Yeah.
So I was very cautious and careful that we took time over this. And we did take time over this. Mm-hmm. So we started tentatively looking, I think, around the time we started looking for your birth mum.
Yeah.
Then I encouraged you, I think, to take an ancestry DNA test.
You did, yes.
Which you did. And this was a couple of years later, which was funny, really, because we'd spent all that time using the paper records, trying to find your mum's side, and your half-sister had also taken an ancestry DNA test.
Yeah.
And had we have gone down that route earlier, we probably would have
Yes.
found that relationship quicker.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things. So you take the ancestry DNA test, and what we were looking for on the DNA test was your cousin matches.
Yeah.
So we were hoping that you would have cousin matches close enough to your biological dad.
Yeah.
Best case scenario would be a half sibling, or but we just didn't have them, did we? I don't think at that time.
No.
So the process, for anybody who's not done this before, you take a DNA test, your cousin matches come back, and then what you are looking for in your cousin matches, you are actually looking for a common ancestor. So Ian has a list of cousin matches that there might be a second cousin or third cousin, but you kind of want to know how those cousin matches are related to each other, and you're looking for this common ancestor. And we were looking for the common ancestor on your dad's line, and there was just nothing. For years, really, everybody was really distant.
Yeah, they were.
And even though we had a name, there was nothing that was really pinpointing who it was. Then we left it for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And then we came back to it. And lo and behold, we had closer cousin matches. More people had taken tests. And we had a closer cousin match. And then I worked out, again, started building the family trees of these cousin matches to see potentially if your biological father appeared in any of those. And he did appear in one of those family trees. And this was of a cousin of yours who is absolutely lovely. I've still got her on Facebook.
Yep.
She's fantastic. And she filled us in on your dad's side.
Yep.
But more than that, she gave us a couple of pictures
Yes.
of your biological father.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, folks, Ian did not need to take a DNA test because you are the image in a couple of those photographs, especially when he's laughing, of your biological father. So how was that to see a picture of somebody, to see a picture of your biological dad, I suppose, to start with, and hear the information of his upbringing?
It was interesting to hear the stories because they really resonated with me in terms of who he was as a person and his personality and similarities to my own. So looking at the pictures was weird because it was pictures of some bloke from the 1960s. I didn't see a resemblance, although other people have.
Honestly, they are identical, folks. Let me tell you, they are identical.
But yeah, the personality side of it was really, really, really useful to explain why I am like I am, I suppose.
Now, unfortunately, your biological father has passed away.
Yeah.
But we do know that somewhere out there, maybe not too far away from this studio in Manchester, you have a half brother.
Yeah.
Is that something that maybe you want to explore? Maybe try and find him or learn more about him?
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's not it's not something I could not do. I think not for any other reason other than to put more colour on the picture. But yeah, I definitely want to.
So now we're at a point where you know an awful lot about your biological mum's side.
Yep.
We know quite a bit about your biological dad's side.
Mm-hmm.
How does that make you feel now, knowing, I suppose, who brought you into the world?
More complete. It's the only way I can describe it, because you when you're growing up and you're and again just my personal experience, when you're growing up and you're adopted and you find out you're adopted, but you also know somewhere deep inside you that you're very different from the people that are raising you, you want answers as to why. So going through this process has been very cathartic, because I've come out of it, obviously still not out of it, but I've come this far, and it makes me feel more confident and more complete about who I am and why I am like I am. So it's incredible.
And as we've mentioned, it's not been an easy path, has it?
No.
There's been ups. Getting that letter from your biological mum was a definite down.
Yeah.
Meeting your half sister, who is incredible. You have a great relationship with.
Yeah.
Connecting with your dad's side of the family, which has been great. But there has been ups and downs, hasn't there, in this process?
Yeah.
Are you glad you did it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't know how. I know how I feel now, and I know how I felt beforehand, And I can't think there would be any circumstances, regardless of the down points, why I would not do it again. And I wish the internet had been invented earlier, so we could have done a lot of it a lot earlier, because it would have made a huge difference to my life. So yeah, it's incredible.
Ian, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. It would have been great if we'd have had Sherry here, but unfortunately she couldn't make it today because she was working.
No.
But she was initially, I think it's fair to say, the driving force.
Oh yeah,
behind this.
Driving force behind a lot of things.
Yeah, behind this. So she's incredible. But thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So that is it, folks, for this week's episode. I really hope you enjoyed my chat with Ian. And thank you so much, Ian, again for coming on the podcast. A huge thanks, as always, to my sponsor for this episode, which is Whitney Antiques. And also thank you to you for listening. Thank you to all your messages. I thoroughly enjoy reading them, so keep sending them in. And don't forget, if you like this podcast, please remember to download. And if you're watching it on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe. Have a great week researching. I am back next week with a new episode. I'm actually recording 2 episodes next week, 2 very exciting episodes that you will be able to hear and watch in the near future. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great week.